Hey, what's up, guys? This is John from TheUndercoverBrony, and I am here with an individual who is very interesting in the fandom, has been doing animating and art for many, many years in this fandom. CaptainHoers, how are you today?
Hi, I'm fine. I am okay. I'm having a very normal day.
Hey, normal's better than having a bad day, that's for sure. So the first question I have for you, I ask everyone this because it's such a fun and varied question, but what is your brony story? How did you get into the fandom?
Okay, so you're right that this does get like weird, and a lot of people have weird, different ways that they got into the fandom. For me, it was 2011. Was basically just on my way out of the Sonic fandom, where I'd been doing like a bunch of like roleplay stuff, and I'd been, a beginner artist.
Mm-hmm.
But something that I was very big into at the time was YouTube poop.
Okay.
For anyone who's not familiar with YouTube poop, it's basically a genre of video remix which has a lot of focus on like memes and just abstract nonsense to make you laugh. And naturally, in 2011, there was a lot of pony YouTube poop that was being posted. And after seeing a bunch of this and enjoying it, I was like, I kind of want some context for this. And then I binged through all of season 1 in like a couple of days, a week maybe. And at that point, it was like that. Then it was just too late. It's like I went straight from there to fan fiction. I wrote my like first fan fiction in like a week following that, and then a couple of months later, I started Firestarter Spitfire, and from there it was just comics all the way down.
Well, what I find really interesting about that is that you already had a presence in a different fandom, being the Sonic fandom, so you already had that kind of foundation set. But then when ponies came around, it's like you were able to just go right into the deep end.
I would say that my time in the Sonic fandom kind of prepared me for like the dynamics, like the social dynamics of fandom, but I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say I had much of an audience there, and I don't think anyone from that community like followed me over. I just kind of like it was the community I was in. It was specifically like the Second Life Sonic community.
Okay.
It was kind of fraying at the edges at that point, so people were just kind of leaving left and right to other stuff, and the ponies happened to be the train that I got on.
Well, I mean, I'm glad that ponies was there to kind of pick you up, as it were. You were also mentioning YouTube poops. Do you have a favorite pony YouTube poop?
Oh god. I think it's difficult to remember a lot of the names of them after so long, but I definitely fondly remember Dan Fango's work. I think a lot of it's been taken down now, which is kind of a shame. So it's difficult to like look it up again. I remember it was one of the ones with the he used like segments from the Fox News segment about bronies, and stuff like that. So.
They're not ashamed to love pain. I speak, of course, of terrorists, otherwise known as a growing number of bronies in love with men. The fanboys have taken to creating pony porn, posting YouTube poop, and creating blog.
Maybe they didn't do the research on this one.
That's the one that's sticking in my head at the moment. But there's there's others that like if I'm probably going to remember them like in the shower later or something.
For me personally, I think the first one I saw, and ponies actually introduced me to YouTube poops as a whole, but it was called My Little Pony Friendship is Not Available in Your Country Due to a Copyright Claim by Hasbro Inc.
Yes, that's another one that like then. Okay, I remember the name. I cannot remember anything in it. I'm sure if like I saw the jokes, I would recognize it, but it's been a long time.
But I have to say the best one that ever came out of the fandom was God Burns Down Equestria for Insurance Money. So, what equipment do you use for your art and animation?
Okay, so I have a copy of Adobe Creative Suite 6 that I bought in college, and I'm stubbornly clinging onto. Adobe will pry this from my cold dead hands. I also have a Wacom tablet. I had an Intuos M that I used for like 10 years or so. I got that like maybe a couple of months before I started doing pony stuff, and it died like 2 years ago, and I replaced that with Wacom like changed the names on all their tablets while I wasn't looking, so I'm not actually sure which one this is, but it's like a similar size, just slightly smaller on desk footprint. But it's a Wacom tablet and it's not the screen ones. I actually don't like drawing directly on the screen. Yeah, the Wacom tablet, you got Photoshop, Flash, will be my main tools. Recently, I've been getting into Blender. That's kind of it, really. It's a pretty tight ship.
Well, hey, I mean, you got it set perfectly for you, and that's great. So how long have you been drawing and animating in the fandom? I know you kind of answered that a little bit in the Brony story, but what kind of brought about a lot of that sort of drawing and animating?
Yeah, it will be 12 years in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Because I remember it was August that I just kind of fell down this rabbit hole, because I remember it was around the same time that I went to like a local anime convention, and there were like pony cosplayers and stuff. What was going around in my head at the time, that was it's a little strange to think about now, but at the time that was like the first time that I wanted to be like a webcomic artist as like a job. I'd been drawing comics here and there since I was like 14, but it was around college when I was reading things like Homestuck, and I think I was reading VG Cats at the time as well. But I was just kind of like learning more about that ecosystem and things like Project Wonderful, and just, the different ways that people can, sustain themselves off this new medium. And that was when I first had like the dream of, I was like, oh wow, I could do this for a job, which is a weird thought to have 2 years into a science degree.
Yeah.
And like I think I'd been like kicking around ideas for like a big old webcomic that on like one subject or another for like years and years and years. And then ponies happened, and I just start doing this stuff for fun, and I just start a blog one day, and that's what gets like a bunch of people paying attention to me. And then I realize, oh, I'm really not ready to like actually just do a proper webcomic. So I think it was that compartmentalization of just kind of putting the magnum opus in a box and just letting myself have fun. And that kind of got me sticking to the creative pursuits, because I was doing them because I wanted to do them, and not for some abstract monetary gain that wouldn't come for years later at that point. The reason I say it's very strange to think about this now is because now I technically am a professional webcomic artist. Like, this is my job now.
I do have to say that I find it interesting. It's actually great that you were doing this webcomic specifically not to gain money. I feel like a lot of individuals coming into any sort of fandom or trying to be a content creator, they're doing it because they want to earn money, not because they're passionate about what they do.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you want to earn money, like, go into finance.
Exactly.
Like, get a real job. Like, the creative arts is like, you don't go into that because you want to be rich and famous. You may accidentally stumble into those things, and I wouldn't even describe myself as rich and famous. I'd make less money than a bus driver. You really gotta like be doing this stuff because you want to be doing it, because otherwise you will just be miserable, be making bad work, and not get the money you were looking for.
And I would say for content creators out there, if you are coming in with a passion and enjoying yourself, see the money as a nice little bonus, not as the main source.
it takes a lot of time and a lot of luck to get to the point where it's like you can like give up the day job. I mean, I watch a lot these days. I watch a lot of like YouTube video essays, and there's been some conversations in that sphere about just the ways that just kind of sucks as a job sometimes. That and like adjacent careers like streaming. Like if you want to be a Twitch streamer these days, like as a job, that's a kind of a bad idea. It's an extremely crowded market. The returns are quite bad. And you have to work all the hours God sends.
I know for me specifically, before I joined the fandom, I went onto YouTube wanting to become a Let's Player, and that kind of fizzled out after several years because while I did have some good friends in that sphere, I never got the viewership that I was at least hoping to look for, and so I know those Let's Plays that I've already done and what I'll continue to do are going to be moved on to a different platform with individuals who will actually want to watch them. But at the same time, you are absolutely right. It does take an extraordinarily high amount of luck in order for something like this to happen.
Yeah, like I have the good fortune to have stumbled into like extraordinary luck multiple times along the way. Like I happened to be on Tumblr in 2011, which was like the right place to be to have like this high energy community getting a lot of hungry for new content. So that was like the first one. And then there was Spitfire's Day Off in 2015. That kind of like unexpectedly blew up, and that was another big audience driver. There was like the Tumblr porn ban, which I was kind of unaffected by because I was just doing like safe for work comics, so I kind of had like a last man standing kind of effect there. Like I'm now like the only reason that some people go to Tumblr. And then in 2020 with the pandemic, everyone had to stay inside. Everyone was bored out of their minds at home, and I was making content online, and they were looking for things to do. And we will be talking a bit about Night Haze later, but that's kind of where that started. Night Haze is a pandemic baby. So that there was just like a number of different like. A lot of opportunities landed in my lap, and I hope I made the best of them.
So since you have been in the fandom for quite a long time, you were saying mid-2011, what has been the biggest change you have seen in the Brony fandom over those many years?
It's difficult to pick out like what's the biggest change, but I think there may be a little bit of recency bias in this. But I think one of the big changes that I've noticed has been a bit of a change in the character of the fandom in like the focused around 2020 2021 because you've got two things that happened around then. One is, like I said, the pandemic, which you had a lot of people running to comfort media. So this is around the same time that like Twilight was making a resurgence, because people were just going back to things that they liked when they were teenagers, because the world is on fire, please give me a hug. You had a lot of people returning to ponies because it was something comfortable. What I think the effect that I think that had is that these were a lot of people who had left the fandom in 2013, 2014, 2015. They just kind of like grew up a bit, and then they kind of went out into the real world for a while, and then they came back, and they brought with them this like maturity and these new perspectives, and I think that like re-energized the fandom a little bit in a positive way. I think towards the end of the show's run, some of the fandom was getting like a little bit stale, a little bit insular, and that's like the beginning of the death of communities, is when it can no longer relate to people outside it, so that like churn becomes a one-way system and you just lose people, and then you end up in 2030 with like 3 people in a room, the IRC room that has like 5 people on it, and they're all like impossible to talk to because it's just 17 years of encrusted memes.
You just end up like the Dashcom ball pit at that point.
I mean, that's a whole other thing. I mean, I'm thinking more about like, oh, this is a tangential experience. So there's a game that I really liked as a teenager called Populous: The Beginning. It's a real-time strategy. It came out in like 1997, so I picked it up like at like a second. I picked it up like secondhand, like 6 years after it came out, and played it to death as single player. But there was this multiplayer option that I could never get working, and I was like, wow, it would be so cool to play this with other people. Years pass, and every now and then I return to this game because it's it's a childhood favorite. But eventually, I do figure out one day how to get the multiplayer working on like community servers, and that is when I realize that I have stumbled into a very tiny community of people who have been playing this game multiplayer non-stop since 1997. So like 15, 20 years at that point. And so it's a community where everyone already knows each other. I am struggling to make introductions. On top of that, I also make the faux pas of there's some kind of like etiquette around forfeiting a match when somebody has a technical problem and crashes or something.
Yeah.
To not mess up their elo, because every game was ranked. A thing that will not cause no problems. So I didn't know this, so I was like, man, a game I can actually win, I'm going to push on to the end. So naturally, this guy who was like, I think he was like one of the like top players in the community, he had his elo crashed, and I jumped up like way to the top, and now everyone was just like, who the fuck is this guy? And yeah, that was very embarrassing. I think I played one other game against someone who, another like community stalwart who was just trying to like assess. It's like, is he really this good? No, he's not really this good. And then I just kind of left and never came back. So that is the danger of your community becoming too insular, is that it just becomes more and more difficult to get new people into it. And I think what the pandemic did is it brought a whole lot of people back, and it made the fandom more approachable, which was good, because then you had G5 come along, and that also injected a lot of new life, a lot of new ideas. People who were, I find very detailed conversations about the canon of the series to be kind of tedious and be kind of alienating to people who aren't like that deep in. So having this entire new generation of stuff that, like, yeah, some people are going to have conversations about, like, ooh, is Zephyr Heights Canterlot or whatever, and like, but a lot of people aren't going to care that much about that kind of stuff, and it gives, those two kinds of people can coexist in the same community. I feel like I've rambled quite a lot on this point. It's a very complicated subject. Fandom sociology is a fascinating subject that we probably don't have time to dive into here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the fandom has definitely gone through quite a bit of I guess you could say, choppy situations. And it's been that way for quite a long time. I do agree with you that, when the pandemic hit, that it brought a lot of old people back, brought a bunch of new people into the fandom. And I'm glad that the fandom itself is still going strong. It may not have as many individuals in the fandom that it used to, but it's still creating content, still making a difference.
I mean, the way the fandom was in 2012, 2013, it was also part of like the Tumblr fandom bubble, which the internet of that era was just a very different place, and I don't think we're going to have the internet be like that again, at least not unless some very strange things happen.
Yeah. So with the last question, you were talking a little bit about G5. Would you like to expand your thoughts on G5 so far?
I quite like it. I think it has a lot of promise and potential. the movie, obviously the best part, A New Generation, is just 9 out of 10, no notes. I actually quite like Tell Your Tale.
Okay.
The YouTube shorts. I feel there was definitely like a little bit of hesitation with the weird art style and the recasting, but it's kind of grown on me. I'm a little bit behind on that. I haven't actually I'm quite behind on that. I feel like the Netflix episodes, I feel like on a technical level they kind of suffer from just it's that old MST3K thing. Like, don't remind me of a better movie I could be watching. And that's just all I can think of when I'm looking at these like movie models with this cheap TV show lighting kind of thing. Because that's one of the really frustrating things about being an animator, is that you just kind of learn to see things that will ruin your life when you're trying to just watch TV and films for fun. I also felt like, I mean, I've heard it's gotten better, which is much of a muchness now that now that Make Your Mark is canned. But I also felt like quite early on that the scripts were often just like a little bit undercooked. Like I feel like they could have just done with a bit more time to just kind of work things out, because sometimes you kind of get that like Barbie VHS effect of the characters are just kind of doing things because there's a particular play set they want to sell, and it doesn't really serve like a plot purpose or anything. They're just kind of there doing it, which is like a shame, because there's also just like some really there's I think one of my favorite episodes of Make Your Mark is the one where Zip and Pip are like the one where they get like stuck in a cave.
Yes.
Like I think one of my favorite things about G5 is the dynamic between Zip and Pip. Like it's even like one of the first things you see in Tell Your Tale as well. There's this great shot where like Pip is overpacking and the bags explode, and Zip is like, "Hey, come on, you don't need 1,400 pairs of shoes.
Yeah.
We need to go." And like all the a bunch of the clothes land on Zip, and she like sees herself in the mirror with like a crown and a scepter and stuff, and she freaks out. And it's like that 3-second visual gag says more about Zip's character than like most episodes of the show. It's just like there's just like a really fascinating dynamic between those two characters, and if I had to summarize, I would say that like there is potential there that I feel like they could be doing more with, but I feel like if I want to get storytelling that's going to satisfy what I want out of these characters, I'm probably going to turn to fandom media. Like that's where you're going to find people who take these interactions and say the things that the writers are basically not paid enough to have the courage to say. Like I quite like the fan interpretation that Zip is transmask. It's just a really interesting idea. Or another interpretation that I quite like is that Misty is from a broken home, which she kind of demonstrably is in the show, but it's just nice to see that kind of thing represented, because a thing that you can have a lot of in children's shows is, especially these kind of like low budget for girls kind of shows, is just everyone having a perfect life all the time.
Yep.
And it does feel like Misty is like just very realistically just from a house where she has a bad time, and you just see her like slowly learn to like have normal friendships with people, and it's sweet and heartbreaking, and it's when it's good, it's really good. When it's bad, it makes me want to claw my eyes out.
For sure. I know you were mentioning Portrait of a Princess a few minutes ago, and I have to say that also was one of my favorite episodes of Chapter 2, specifically for that dynamic between Zip and Pip. Because for me specifically, Zip became my favorite character of the series. And being able to see that sisterly bond that They are diametrically opposite individuals. However, because they are sisters, they still eventually, at the end of the day, will come together and work together. And I think that's beautiful.
It is a little bit of a shame how like Sunny has kind of fallen into the backseat in the show, which I'm not too upset about because the movie is kind of all about her and the kind of character that she is. If she's not trying to change the world, she kind of doesn't really have much to do. So the movie is kind of ideal for her. So it's not super terrible that she's kind of more of a supporting character now. But like I said, fan work is probably where I'm gonna find the most satisfaction.
Absolutely understandable with that. Since you have been to multiple conventions over in Europe, what has been your favorite convention experience?
I think overall, I think probably Buck 2014.
Okay.
So Buck 2014, that was the first time I was staffing a convention. I was also a guest, so I was also doing an animation panel. But I was also I was on the front desk doing ticketing and customer service and stuff.
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of Stockholm syndrome in there, to be honest, because staffing a convention is a lot of work. You are essentially just doing free labor for multiple days, and just to make it even more difficult, that summer I had a hard drive failure on my laptop, and this was a serious problem because I was also doing the promotional animation for the con, which was on that laptop, and there was just kind of me and the head of PR who his day job was doing laptop repair, so he had spare components. We were just kind of trying to resuscitate this thing. We ended up doing this this super hacky fix of I had this Ubuntu live CD hanging around that I made years ago, and that was how we got the files off of the hard drive onto an external hard drive that the convention owned. They sent that over, and what I did was I took an old hard drive out from an old laptop, and I just shoved that into the current laptop, which that old hard drive was running Windows Vista.
Oh, wow.
And I finished the animation and made the con book on Windows Vista.
Wow.
I now remember how this impacted the con itself. The hard drive that my data was being lifeboated onto, along with a fresh laptop hard drive, that only arrived on the Wednesday before the convention. And I live in Ireland, so I had to fly over there for the con, and I was flying on Thursday. So this thing arrives in the mail on Wednesday, and I basically have about 24 hours to get my laptop in working order before I bring it over to the con to do my presentation at the animation thing. By Sunday, I was sleeping under the table anytime I could get a minute, which sounds awful, but it's one of those things that I had a lot of fun doing exactly once. If I had to do it again, I would not do it again. And it was probably a function of the fact that I was 22 probably helped it feel fun and doable. I would not be able to do it now.
It's really funny that you mention kind of the Stockholm Syndrome section of it, because mine's not quite as flamboyant as yours was. But I will say that there's two main conventions over by me, and I live in Wisconsin in the U.S. And the two conventions that we have out here is Ponyville Cider Fest in Milwaukee, and then Winnie City PonyCon in Chicago. And I was staffing for Winnie City one year as a videographer. I was the one who was making sure all the recordings got recorded. Right before the con started, we had no other videographers. So literally that entire convention, I was literally there in the smaller of the two, in the two smaller panel rooms. Click a button, to make sure it's recording. Then I have half hour, get back over to the other one, stop that recording, and then half hour later stop the other recording. It was crazy.
I kind of understand what you went through there, because the tech and media team for Buck, they were the first people on site in the morning and the last people to leave at night, which is grueling. I did remember one other con experience that was it's probably like Buck 2014 was probably my favorite like overall convention, which also aided in that by the fact that the venue for that year had a lot of like digital signage, which, as the artist in residence for the convention, I made all of the signage. So I basically got to graphic design the con, and they gave me an alarming amount of creative freedom in that.
That's awesome.
I kind of took their very, very prim and proper image of Britannia, the con's mascot, and it's like, well, this year she's a punk. Enjoy. The other con experience I was going to talk about, this is more like it's not the con itself. It was, just a thing that happened at a con. 2019 was the year that I did GalaCon and BronyCon, and they were a week apart on different continents.
Yep.
So that was a bit of an adventure, but that was also the convention with the bag adventure. So this happened like the night that GalaCon finished, and I was telling this story just like all through BronyCon. GalaCon finishes at about like 6 o'clock on the Sunday. Everyone they go away, they have dinner, they shower to get all the sweat of 33 degree that's European temperatures, like 90 degree Germany off of them before they go to this bar called Towers, where like it's adjacent to like a big square, and you just have like hundreds of bronies just descend on this one bar and this one square, and they just hang out for the rest of the night. So we did that. That's all well and good. I'm hanging out with my friends. I'm like just running around, speed social thinging, and then at some point the bar has to close, and they tell people to like leave. So a lot of the diehards, they have historically moved to the steps next to the train station for StairCon, which is basically people hanging around drinking until sunrise.
That's hilarious.
I think what happened with StairCon last year is there was a noise complaint from the hotels nearby, because there's a bunch of hotels like right next to the train station as well.
Yeah.
And after that, they moved to the park. As a tangent, when we did that last year, I dropped my phone on the way there, and I consoled myself with like mystery Slovakian moonshine that somebody gave me in a plastic cup. I'm amazed that I remember anything about that night. But anyway, back to 2019. So we have the way this situation normally works: convention, dinner, Towers, StairCon. As Towers closed and people start moving in like little groups to StairCon, we had like a bunch of people hanging out at a fountain in the middle of the square, which people kind of start moving there even before the bar closes, because it's a little quieter, it's away from the rest of the group, and you can like have conversations. So we're there, and we have a small group of us. I think it was a few of my friends had like already gone on to StairCon or like gone home because they did not feel like drinking until sunrise. But there was just like me and a friend, and we found this bag that we were like the last people to leave the fountain, and there was this just backpack just left by the fountain. And we're like, oh, that's unfortunate. Maybe, and we have like the bright idea, having already had like a couple of beers, maybe we can find who this belongs to. So we, maybe searching the bag was a little rude, but we did find, some evidence that might point us in the right direction. We found a staff shirt.
Ooh.
Like a volunteer staff shirt specifically, so it belongs to not like one of the board members, but like one of the volunteers, and also a train ticket.
Oh.
The train ticket was for 4 a.m. that morning.
Oh no.
So, and at that point it was already like midnight. So it's like, okay, we now have 4 hours to find who this bag belongs to.
Yeah.
But we also had also on the train ticket was a name. So it's like, okay, we can go around like asking about this person. I'm not gonna say like a dude's like just real ass name on your podcast, but it was a name that basically could be easily confused for David Hasselhoff. So we went around to like, we were like, we just, asking around the stragglers at Towers. We, asked around at StairCon. I think we stopped by the hotel where a bunch of the staff were staying, who they basically said, what do you want from us? You found a bag on city property. The con is over. Go away. But we went to all these different people, and every time it was just like, have you seen this person, David Hasselhoff? It's like, no, we're not looking for David Hasselhoff. So eventually we just decide, okay, not knowing what to do, we take it to a police station. Now, fortunately, my friend who was following me around in this nonsense was German and, could speak German to people when necessary, which is good because the police barely spoke any English. So, I'm feeling, but like, he's the one that can speak German. I'm the one that has ID. And of course, the police want to see ID before they, do anything with this, like, lost item report. So I put my passport, which is my ID, into this like little tray to go through the window, this like big bomb-proof counter kind of thing. And she like pulls it through, and it gets to the other side, and the passport's not there.
What?
It's like, oh, okay. So it turns out it had just like gotten like folded up in like something in the counter, and we it came out like easily. But just for a moment there, I'm just like, oh my god, have I lost my travel documentation in a counter that's probably going to be very difficult to take apart? So just anxious times in a police station. And it turns out that even after like waiting around in this police station in another country for like a couple of hours, it turned out not to be the thing that got the bag to the guy in the end. It did, this story does have a happy ending. Turns out my friend was just like, asking around on Telegram groups for like German bronies. It's like, hey, we found this bag with this train ticket. And the guy, he found his way back to us, and we had a laugh, and we went back to StairCon. Drank so much I blacked out, and then had a really horrible journey home with a massive hangover. So yeah, that was an adventure.
When I wrote this question out, I was not expecting that sort of answer. That's great.
I mean, this is. I have more, but I don't think we have time.
Yeah. Moving on to your animations and art specifically, what animation for you has been the most difficult to produce?
Okay, so I had to think about this one for a while, and it turns out it brings us right back to conventions because
perfect timing.
Yeah. So like honorable mention to like the Galacon 2019 animation, which not 2019, 2020, which 2021. Sorry. Or was it 2022? I am getting my years mixed up. It was the one that was delayed a bunch by the pandemic. 2022. Yeah, that's the one. So, I'd written this script in 2019, And, then a pandemic happens. And suddenly the pressure is off to get this thing, to get this thing done in time. It's like, oh, well, okay. I can just, put that on the long finger, we'll get back to it. 2021 rolls around, still no convention. It's 2022 is when it's set for. So I get back from BabsCon that year. I'm like, right, okay, it's time to work on the thing. Why isn't my external hard drive working? Surprise, it's another hard drive failure.
Oh, no.
And unfortunately, this one I did not have backups for. So the project file... Now, fortunately, I hadn't lost a ton of work. It was maybe just like a little bit of... a few like walking loops and stuff. So it was... it wasn't the end of the world. It was just annoying. And also, keep backups, kids. I have been a loyal subscriber to Backblaze ever since. But that's not the most difficult production. That's probably that's just an honorable mention. The most difficult one was probably Buck 2016.
Okay.
The idea with how the art and design and animation side of that convention, how that was supposed to work is I'd gone back to college for the academic year 2015 to 2016. So I had I'd said this like well in advance, like, hey, I will not have as much free time to work on stuff, so can I get some help? And the con were like, yeah, sure, we will grab some people and they can take some stuff off your plate. And it's like, that's all fine. I still talk to one of these people, so I don't want to be too mean, but they were not the most helpful people in the world when it comes to like an animation production pipeline. Because like we had this, that was the year we had like the the when can we see you again kind of thing. And what we had envisioned was that we had 3 people. One person was not going to be involved in the animation. They were just going to do like merch and the con book and stuff like that. And then other person who is not me, he would do the rough sketch animation for like the really the early stage stuff, and then I would like clean it up and make it look all pretty and stuff. It turns out that just for one reason or another, he was just completely unable to do his side of the work. Like it was between like unmedicated ADHD and trouble at home and like falling behind on college work and money problems. He just wasn't able to keep up his end of the bargain. And also kind of slowly got sucked into doing more of the merch stuff because the other merch person was also kind of unreliable.
Man.
This wouldn't be so difficult if they had just like come right out early on and said, hey, we can't do this, can you just do it, can you deal with this? Because if we'd had all that time, because the con was in April, and we'd made these plans like the previous July, and if we'd found out in like October or something that there was a problem, then that would be fine. We could deal with that. It was March.
Oh
when
no!
It became clear that the only way this animation was going to get done is if I hold it across the finish line myself. Which I did. I did get around to it. I mean, the sound came out like that was like the smoothest part of this production. Like every time I've worked with Lavender Harmony, she has just been absolutely just flawless to work with. Just no problems at all. Everything's on time. Everything's high quality. It's other visual collaborators that I have problems with. But yeah, we got that. We got that over the line in the end, and it was only ready in time to show for the opening ceremony.
Wow.
I remember being in the green room when they were showing it, and I think it was Silverhound that just kind of like heard this playing through the wall and was just like, who the fuck had the idea to play Owl City? And me in my staff shirt, just kind of like nonchalantly, kind of like, I'm finding something else to do because it was my idea.
Yeah.
I gotta know. Till then, when can we do this again? Oh. When can we see you again? Oh. When can we do this again? Oh. It's time to go. When can we see you again?
Moving on to the worst project you've had, what has been the most fun project you are doing or have done?
This is another tough question because there's a lot of things it could be.
Mm-hmm.
I think the one that I settled on was my board game Stardust.
Okay.
The kind of stuff that I find the most engaging to work on is stuff that has it's not all creative work. There's a little bit of technical work. So that's one of the reasons that I've taken such a dive into game design, and we're going to get to that later.
Mm-hmm.
Is that there is just a little bit for the logic brain to dig into as well. And that's also something I've quite enjoyed about Blender, is just solving all these technical problems with the stuff is on top of the the creative stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Stardust in particular, that's my third or fourth released board game. Not counting all the the half-finished prototypes that are just sitting in tabletop sim, gathering dust.
Mm-hmm.
But Stardust, spiritually, there's some of another, one of those other prototypes in it that I think about a year beforehand, I'd been picking away at an idea for a cooperative game based on power ponies.
Mm-hmm.
So the players were going to be superheroes, and they'd use their abilities to fight hordes of bad guys and stuff. And that never really came together for one reason or another. And then just kind of almost some kind of divine intervention, just out of nowhere, just springing almost fully formed from my head. I just scribble down the prototype components for Stardust in 2 hours, and then I have it in front of players later that day, and they're like, wow, this is actually quite good, can we play again? Mm-hmm. There's a bit of an art to testing prototypes with your friends and or fans, because they're always inclined to be nice to you.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to you have to really look for signs that they're actually having fun versus they're just being nice to you.
Mm-hmm.
But I could tell people just really like Stardust right away. For people who don't know what I'm talking about, Stardust is a board game where the players are astronauts on a space station, and you just kind of go around fixing damage and completing the mission objectives, and trying not to make the ship explode. It's I've the super short pitch for people who are familiar with board games is Pandemic in space. It's that kind of thing. It's just in a much smaller box, with half the components, plays in half the time. Check it out. But the development of that was just super smooth. The version that is in the box now is alarmingly similar to the first prototype. I had to change very little to make that work, and I'm honestly kind of surprised, because a lot of games you do have to just keep hacking away at that prototype to get it to work right.
For those who are interested in getting to know a little bit more about that game and getting to know a little more about the rule set, I will be putting the video that Captain Horse has done about that in the description.
Yes, good. That was another fun thing to work on. But another fun thing about Stardust was the art style, because it was just kind of it's a bit of a departure from the other stuff that I've done. it's just diving super deep into like Y2K aesthetics, which, you know, you got all these like, you know, translucent plastics like a G3 iMac and like this like blobby silver buttons and stuff. And it's just an aesthetic I find really fun, and it is nice to have that, like, you know, colorful vision of like what we thought the future would look like in like 1999.
Okay.
That's a really fun aesthetic to work in.
You know, that really is. I mean, back in 99, a lot of us who were around then, we really thought that the future would be a lot different than what it actually turned out to be. And the future we got, I ain't happy with it. That's one thing for sure.
Yeah, it's not where are my silver foil pants? You know.
Yep, where are my hoverboards? Going a little bit deeper into your board game, what inspired you to create your tabletop games?
I first got into hobby board games, like, as you know, like modern ones, not Monopoly and Candyland, you know, things like, you know, Carcassonne and, you know, Catan and stuff. That my first exposure to that was in college. I joined the Tabletop Game Society mainly because it was the nerd society that their room was closest to where all my classes were. So it was convenient to just kind of, you know, go there and, like, you know, hang out away from like all the crowds in the cafe. But that's when I discovered, oh, actually I quite like some of these things. Some of these things are quite good. And then I left college, and then I just kind of forgot about board games for several years. But it was then in like 2017, that's when I started making them. And it was because I was so 2017 I was unemployed. I had finished college from like the previous year, and I had not yet found a job. So I had a lot of time to kill. This is also when I started Sunjackers. I had a lot of time to kill, and I was watching just like a lot of just YouTube, and just on a whim, just by chance, I was watching like Extra Credits, and the Extra Credits had a video about board games. Like, why should you design board games if you care about video games? And they recommended a channel called Shut Up and Sit Down. Shut Up and Sit Down, they review board games, and they're great. They extremely funny. Can't recommend them enough. They're, you know, their stuff holds up even like going back years and years and years. So I just devour all this like board game content in very quick succession, and then I start getting a dangerous thought, which is, oh, I could actually make some of these. Like, I think the thing that like flips that switch is realizing that Tabletop Simulator has a utility in it for like quickly generating like card decks. I was like, oh, I could actually do this, and that's when I start subjecting my friends to like horrible half-baked prototypes that are just like, yeah, it's like Carcassonne mixed with Twilight Imperium. That isn't a terrible combination. But like like, you know, like with, you know, starting the blogs, it's one of those things that like I'm not looking at this as like a career thing. I'm just like, yeah, this sounds like fun. You know, I'm bored and looking to amuse myself for a day. You know, sure, I'll make a board game. And that persists for like years and years and years of just like, you know, kicking over prototypes because, you know, it seems like fun. It's only in like 2019 when I'm like inspired to start vending that I realized like, oh, I could actually, you know, there's this service called The Game Crafter, which does print on demand board games with like a very wide variety of like components and stuff. I was like, oh, I could actually make this real. I could like put ponies on these prototypes, and, you know, other people might actually be interested in them. And that's how I started doing that. This is also like similar timeline from when I started doing Night Haze. That was somewhere along this, but like greatly assisting this kind of like, you know, prototyping and designing and stuff was the fact that for most of 2019, I was effectively underemployed. Like, I was at my job in an animation studio, but they weren't giving me enough work, and I was just like getting through all of my scenes with like, a day to spare. So I would just, and like the supervisors could see my desk, so I couldn't just like stick on YouTube, but they couldn't stop me from like having a notebook beside my keyboard and just kind of like sketching away at like ideas. And like animations can also be like quite tedious. It gives you like a lot of time to just kind of think about other things while you're doing it. And being bored at work is a powerful recipe for coming up with things that you want to do when you get home. So, short answer, boredom. I started making games because I was bored.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. So moving on to your Tumblr blog, what inspired you to create the world and characters within those blogs? Because for those who have seen them, it is Spitfire, but that's only the basis of the character. The creation of the different aspects of the character is very much a creation of you, Captain Horse.
So, I suppose Spitfire was, again, another, like, well, I'm bored and this sounds like fun kind of thing. At the time, in 2011, Spitfire was, like, she was only known from, like, 30 seconds of appearance in one episode of the show. She was... I basically treated her like a character adopt. It's like, I'm going to take this design and I'm going to do whatever the hell I want with it. And, at the time I was, I was still like, not very good at writing. So I was just kind of like just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. It's funny because I was still kind of irony poisoned at the time. I mean, that's a thing I forgot to mention in the like changes in the fandom is that one of the positive changes that's come about recently because of people returning from having lived lives and people coming from G5 is a wave of sincerity. That's quite good to see. But like 2011, I was definitely kind of irony poisoned, and a lot of my ideas at the time were just kind of like dark and edgy kind of things.
Yeah.
And I think like the first crack in that was when somebody asked me, it's like, hey Spitfire, why are you an alcoholic? Because alcohol is funny. But I decided to have the answer. No, it wasn't why are you an alcoholic. It was how did you become captain? And the answer I gave was default, because I came up with this character Hurricane, who was her friend, and she died in like an accident, and it's sad, and that's why she drinks, because she's traumatized. And that was the first post of mine that like exploded a little bit. That was the first time that it went kind of a little bit viral. I say a little bit viral. It was like 300 notes or something. Actually, it wasn't even that. It was like 50. I 50. If I make it like a Sunjackers update and it only gets 50 notes, that's a bad day at the office.
Yeah.
That was when I started like gathering an audience, and I guess that's the first thing is like, oh, maybe actually like having characters have sincere emotions lets people relate to them. And I guess that's it all kind of started piling on from there of just like trial and error of building out these character relationships, and it's a long hike from Spitfire the alcoholic who still just occasionally does Homestuck cosplay randomly to Spitfire in Act 9, which I wrote in 2021, where she's like retired from the Wonderbolts, and she has like she does like TV now, like a lot of retired former athletes do. she's married to Soren and they have a child, and there's like that arc is about her, reconnecting with her estranged siblings because she's trying to get them together for her wedding. It's a long hike from one to the other, but it at every turn it's like it is correcting in the direction of expressing sincere emotion. Like, I think that's been like the journey of that blog and that character. There's something almost autobiographical in the way that it kind of reflects me learning to basically growing up. Learning to not be afraid of having feelings as the masculine person. Something that I had prepared the notes for was actually just completely different. I was going to talk about the fact that I draw characters with laptops and cell phones and cars and stuff, which is it's that's just kind of G5 now, but back then it was not the most common thing. But I guess that's just, it's not super important, but I have like a bit of a taste for that kind of like mundane detail of like when I'm drawing a background, I'll think about like what do the sockets look like, why what I'll include a thing like someone forgot a phone charger or something. I like that kind of like storytelling in like the margins of just like, there's more world going on. That turned out to prepare me really well for Sunjackers, because once that moves into away, because Spitfire basically lives in the modern world, but there's horses. That's you can kind of see that with Spitfire's Day Off. It's like the most fantastical thing in Spitfire's Day Off is there's a city in the clouds, but the city in the clouds still has traffic lights and stop signs. But when you kind of move that from this like modern setting into a science fiction one in Sunjackers, that's when these details become a lot more important, because you're having to explain a world that is to some degree unfamiliar. I mean, it's still like it's still very modern. It's still like built on that chassis, and it's like it's not that far in the future. Like we're not talking like Mass Effect, Star Trek kind of technology, but there's still things that need explaining. One example would be cars. Like in Sunjackers, all the cars are self-driving. Like driving a car yourself has been banned, and the one of the things I like to think about is just like, what does this actually look like, and what are the consequences of this? And especially in the frame of this horrible cyberpunk world where corporations run everything and they're trying to squeeze you for every penny. So this is where you get things like parking lots getting bought up by the companies that own these self-driving cars, like Uber with their fleet of self-driving cars. They need somewhere to charge them, so they just buy up all the parking lots. There's stuff like surveillance in these self-driving cars, where if they think you're guilty of if you're suspected of a crime, they can just decide you're going to a police station now. Or like one of the something that I'm proud of how stupid it is, a crosswalk app where rather than have these cars just like stop when someone is on the road in front of them, you have to have this app on your phone that tells the network that these cars are talking to each other on. They're like, hey, there's a pedestrian here, maybe you should not hit me. And it's just so wonderfully stupid that like that's one of the fun things about creating this dystopian world, is that you're not making a world that works, you're making a world that doesn't work, and you get to decide all the ways in which it doesn't work.
I mean, that's what I've noticed with your blogs, is that they are very unique, very punk-esque in the way that the worlds are created and move through. It's very, very interesting. So I'm sure, as someone who has run a couple of Tumblr blogs for many years now, you've had plenty of commission work. What has been your most unique commission?
So I don't actually get a ton of commission work, just because I'm not super interested in doing commissions. I I've taken a couple here and there, but I definitely did have an answer ready for this one, and it's actually one that I am. When I say I'm doing right now, I don't have the file open right in front of me, but it's like it's one that I'm taking at the moment, where someone wanted a like an in-universe passport for their character. And it's like the passport mugshot is like, that's just part of it. The main thing that I'm being commissioned for is the design of the passport itself. And this is entirely because years ago I did one of these passport designs. Like I designed deals like, hey, what does my version of Equestria's passport look like? Because I'm a nerd and I'm into those kind of details. Like I designed their number plate as well, and I use that number plate all the time in Sunjackers. I designed a passport for Equestria, but this, the commissioner is like, my character is from, they're like a dual citizen of these two other countries. Could you design passports for these two other countries? And I'm like, hell yeah, I'll do that. That sounds like something I may have done anyway. Boring details, love them.
Yeah, that was the other really interesting thing about, Sunjackers and Ask Pitfire is that, it's all about those little details that make the world so rich and so interesting. So I was also, through my research, found out you were making an RPG. Would you like to tell me a little bit about that?
Oh boy. So we're going to be here for another 20 minutes. So Night Haze, as I mentioned a couple of times earlier, is the name of the role-playing game. It is set in the world of Sunjackers, so that's a nice little segue from talking about Sunjackers into Night Haze. One of the reasons that I got into it was because I had spent all this time making this world and developing it, and having all this behind the scenes work that a lot of it doesn't make it into the comic, even with these sections where a character will just field a question that is entirely an excuse to show off world building. There's a lot of it that doesn't make it onto the page, partly because when you do stop to do world building, the story grinds to a halt, and that's not necessarily good reading, and partly because there's just so much world building. So I made this role-playing game partly to have somewhere for all that world building to go. There's all these stories that I don't have time to write a comic about, but if you're doing a campaign with your players, you might have time to explore that. It just kind of has become a vessel for all kinds of my opinions. If I can get even more boring for a second, I have strong opinions about game design, having designed games for a while. I've thought a lot about game mechanics. So a lot of a trend in role-playing games of recent years has been towards a kind of looser, more storytelling style. So things like Apocalypse World and the Descendant system powered by the Apocalypse, which does a lot of other games like Monster Hearts and Thirsty Sword Lesbians and stuff like that. It's a very quick chassis to build an RPG off, and tons of people have done it, and it's fine. It's people quite like it. And then there's other games that have a similar philosophy, like Blades in the Dark, which also lets people use its system, and Spire. Spire is I think the name of the game. That's a game that it doesn't strictly speaking use one of those systems. It just uses a system like it, and it has a similar kind of approach of very abstracted, very cinematic, very drama-focused approach to doing a role-playing game. And that's fine. I'm a tactics nerd, and I want something more mechanically crunchy to dig my teeth into. So that I kind of, Night Haze is not one of those kinds of games. It is almost completely opposite. But at the same time, I don't want to just be making math homework for people. I have played the infamous Fallen Equestria RPG, and I know that like I don't want to make something as complicated as that. So Night Haze is, I'm kind of trying to thread a needle here. I'm like, how do I make something that is mechanically robust enough that it can, appeal to the logic side of my brain without just being, an EVE Online amount of spreadsheets. You don't want that. I like to I like to think that I've kind of threaded this needle with how it's turned out. As far as like positive inspirations as opposed to negative inspirations, things that I don't want the game to be. Positive inspirations. I was very inspired by immersive sim games. So games like Deus Ex and Hitman and Thief and Dishonored and stuff like that. Their approach to gameplay is built around it's effectively a simulation. For contrast, you can have very scripted games like Uncharted or The Last of Us, or Metro can be quite like this as well, where you are effectively doing QuickTime events on a cutscene. There may be a little bit of stealth going on here and there, and that gives you some meat to interact with in the play space, but it's a lot of the most important stuff happens where they they take control away from you and do a pre-designed animations, pre-designed assets, predetermined outcome kind of thing. That's a heavily scripted game. Immersive sims are very systemic. The game is a system that is just kind of minding its own business, and you can poke it somewhere and it will react in real time. That's the juice as far as I'm concerned in gameplay is Night Haze is a box of toys. It is you have a very simple mechanical basis of here's your attributes, here's your skills. They give you dice, you roll dice to do checks. There's a stamina thing where you can add that to checks, but don't spend too much of it because it's also the resource that you need to spend to cast spells. That's all simple enough. All the meat of the game is in the equipment list, which is half of the rulebook, and it's all just physics toys. It is a game full of physics toys. There's stuff there's a grappling hook, because of course there's a grappling hook, and there's also a power fist kind of thing. But the power fist, it does knockback based on how far you've moved this turn. So put two and two together, you use the grappling hook to swing around like Spider-Man and then land a hit with this power fist, and the bad guy just goes. It's a very tactical positioning kind of game. There's a lot of throws in it. It's it can sometimes feel a bit Disgaea-y in terms of you can just throw enemies around like a volleyball. There's a lot of abilities to do that. There's a lot of I've spent this game has been a huge part of my life for 3 years. I could go on and on and on and on. Anyway, so the mechanics is obviously something I'm very excited about with this game, but also it's allowed me to expand the world of Sunjackers. It's got me to think more about the cultural landscape of the setting. So you've got all these different countries and all the the different kinds of creatures that come from them, and then it's got me to ask questions about what happened to this place when the sun we somehow managed to get an hour and a half into this podcast without mentioning the premise of Sunjackers, which is oops, the sun disappeared. That's a really important detail. How did all these different different places react to there suddenly no longer being a sun? How did they respond to this crisis? What how did their society change? Some of these countries that they're hanging on. Some of them, they became like a really horrible place to live, and then their society just kind of collapsed. Some of these places were just abandoned entirely, like their entire population just moved to a safer place. There's nothing quite like preparing the setting to in enough detail for other people to make characters in it. There's nothing quite like that for getting yourself to ask all these weird questions about the setting and filling it out. So like the in among all the box of physics toys, there's all kinds of things like languages. Like I've thought a lot about what kind of languages there are. I've thought about sign language and how you've got different kinds of sign language for creatures with that have digits like griffins and ones that don't. You have a cell phone, obviously, and there's a huge list of phone apps, and some of them are functional, like tools for hacking or controls for a drone. Some of them are just kind of fun, like social media apps and games. And it's it's been a lot of fun just kind of filling this out with things that are there might be neat mechanical things to try out or just fun world details. It's currently just all in a big Google sheet at the minute. At one point, the plan is to eventually compile this into a proper book-shaped thing with art and stuff. Right now, it's I haven't committed to that, because once you start doing art for it, it's that's when you're kind of locked into a certain layout, and I'm still teasing out mechanics and coming up with new ideas, or trying to simplify things so they're easier to understand. One of the things that I just added last week was I managed to get this far without a system for I know a guy kind of thing, building out a network of contacts, where it's really simple to do that. You just roll a dice, and it's you have a contact with 5 influence at the company that makes the food, kind of thing, something like that. It's this game has been here for 3 years. How has that not been here already? That seems like a really important thing. Other thing that I just added this week was the ability to do experimental surgery on people to make their bodies accept more cybernetic implants, in case you want to be a mad scientist. Very few people are ever going to bother using that. Still fun to have in the world, I guess. I don't know. I'm still kind of treating it like a work in progress thing, and eventually, at some point, I'm gonna have to, knuckle down and decide what stays and what doesn't. It's already been through a couple of total rewrites. The version numbering I have is every time it increments the largest number, that's a time that I've just rewritten the whole thing from scratch, and I've done that. We're on 0.3 at the moment, so I've rewritten it twice. 0.3 was written 2 years ago, so I think we're getting to the point where at some point, when I find myself with 2 weeks lost in the woods or something with just my laptop, that will be the time that I sit down, rewrite it again from scratch, throw out a bunch of stuff that's just too complicated, and maybe that will be the version that I put on Indiegogo and try and raise money for a book printing of. I don't know.
Well, my final question for you today is, where can people find you?
Oh, boy! It's really funny that you asked this, because since you contacted me, platforms have just decided to get very strange. So I am, Captain Horse everywhere. Captain normal spelling, horse HOERS, no space. You can find me on Tumblr. That's where most of my work is. That's where you'll also find Ask Firestarter Spitfire and Ask the Sunjackers and Board Games with Friends, which is my blog where I have Rainbow Dash and Twilight just talk about board games nothing complicated. They just talk about board games, or Agents of Heart. Don't get me started on that. We'll be here all day. I'm also Captain Horse on YouTube, on Twitter. I just joined Equestria Social like a month ago. You know what? I'm going to do what I eventually just gave up and did with my business cards, which is my business cards now just have my link tree on them. And the page has like 20 different links, and it also has like the link to Night Haze and all the supporting documents. Like I've got like a DM guide for that as well, and it's like a bestiary that currently only has one page because I keep being like, the thing I'm excited to do is add more toys for the players to do to play with, and coming up with bad guys. I probably should do more. Like the people who are running Night Haze games want me to do that more, and I keep not doing it, so I should probably do that. But yes, Linktree, Captain Horse. That would be where you find all of my everything.
Well, there you go. Thank you so much for coming on for this interview. This was an absolute blast to do.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me witter for an hour and a half. I hope it was entertaining.
So, without further ado, that's it from me, John.
I'm Captain Horse, and I need to pee.
And we'll talk to you guys later. Peace out, Dragon.